The Apprentice is a relationship film between a young real estate uh, developer and a ruthless, brilliant lawyer. And set in late 1970s, early to mid 1980s, Manhattan, New York City, um, and it's really an exploration, between of the American dream and a belief system um, as it's being passed down between these two men. Yes, I had seen Ollie's work. I had seen Border. Then in 22, they sent me Holy Spider, which I equally loved. Um, and I was excited meeting him even in 2019. The idea of him taking on the story was really interesting to me, especially him as a filmmaker, but also him being from Iran and living in Copenhagen and being essentially a European filmmaker. I know there have been a lot of reiterations of Roy Cohn. Famous people have played Roy Cohn, but to me, I feel there's no one else that has done that has played this role or will ever play the role again after Jeremy. He was a real partner in this. I was very grateful for that. I think we both went into this 160% because of the nature of how we were shooting and that there was no time. We really did not interact outside of set, outside of being in costume, outside of being in character, I guess you could say. And so um, we only sort of, we had one initial meeting before we started shooting, and I could see right away that we were kind of very similar in kind of how we wanted to take on this thing. And he was exactly what you would hope for, in the sense of a sparring partner that you could really challenge. You could be challenged by, but also you could be inspired to sort of discover the most out of these two characters, out of these two people, and that's what we did. I think it was a real dance, and it was never something I could predict from one day to the next. I think we were always on our toes. One of the things that was very helpful was that Ollie managed in some magical way to put a lot of the earlier stuff first, so we could really establish the foundation of the relationship, and then we could kind of, as we got to the second half of the movie, that was later on in the shoot, so we had already a relationship to draw from. But I think it just sort of naturally evolved weirdly. At some point there may have felt like a shift in a way, and it was really interesting because we shot it over Christmas break, and a lot of the 1970s stuff was in the first chunk between November and December, like 23rd or whatever, and then the second part was after Christmas break, which was like January 2nd until February 1st or whatever, and we always refer to those as the 70s and the 80s. and I believe when we came back from the Christmas break, we were in that second half weirdly, and again, it was just a surprise, but in a good way, because it felt like we were naturally discovering it. It wasn't something that was ever planned or whatnot. I think Ollie was incredibly communicative in terms of giving us different ideas to play with this thing, so that we weren't always result oriented, or we weren't always thinking about, here's what we have to remember about the characters later on and whatever. It was always sort of this balance of this tennis game of power, and it would start off sometimes in takes. It might be more than the previous take, and then I think he found the balance in the editing room with that. But yeah, I mean, one day it was just suddenly Donald was ahead. I love working with Maria. She was extremely committed. I felt she was really open as well to ideas and kind of us sort of being improvisational. There was a lot of improv in the movie. I think also with Jeremy, but also with her, and really finding different levels of intimacy. But again, I felt there was trust there. I felt I think I had actually met her before, and obviously when you're meeting somebody that you're going to be intimate with in any way, you want to make sure that you have a degree of trust and safety, and a way of communicating with each other in case anything comes up. And that was, I think it was important for us to have that kind of level of communication about everything. But because then you can actually go to those places that are darker, and you can feel that you're opposite somebody who, you know, is you trust. And if you don't have that, it's not really possible to go there. I basically go and I create a collage of videos and images and interviews and various things that I can find, and I sort of narrow it down more specifically as I go. But in 22, I just went in on the internet and I just pulled whatever I could find of him from the time period. Any interviews he'd done, anything visual, anything audio, you know, I just tried to grab it. And I did read The Art of the Deal, which was really interesting because I actually found it to be much more entertaining than I thought. If you're learning to play a piece of music on the piano, you start off and very slowly. You have to go and get the keys right, and then the next day you sit down and practice, and you're doing it again and again until you can do it with your eyes closed, until you like memorized it and it's just part of your body and you don't think about it. So that was sort of how I was approaching the physicality and the way of speaking and all that stuff. And then we were dealing with the prosthetics. We hadn't really quite decided how much prosthetics or not. I actually wanted to use as little prosthetics as possible, and I wanted to go after the essence rather than try to do a likable, not likable, like a likability kind of sort of look or something. But the prosthetics, we weren't happy with it. So Ali had asked me how much weight I can gain in like 2 months. So I started eating and basically everything and drinking lots of Coca-Cola. So there's that part of it. I feel like we're in this time period now where people are very anxious for an answer. They really want to be told what to think and what to do. And I think we should be more encouraging towards staying more open-minded and finding a better way to communicate about things, but also just to be able to go like see for yourself, like experience it for yourself. And I think the movie can be very powerful if people can go and be open to that.
The Apprentice is a origin story and a sort of a Frankenstein story of how Donald Trump, as we know him today, was created through the mentorship of Roy Cohn, this mythical figure of New York socialite political scene of 70s and 80s. It came to me as Amy Bear and the writer, my co-writer Gabe Sherman, who have been working on this for some time, decided that they wanted to have an outside they wanted to have an outside perspective on this very polarizing political subject in America. And, frankly, I think also part of it is probably they couldn't find an American director who wanted to like risk their career in Hollywood becoming friends or enemies with Donald and his supporters and his enemies, and they probably saw my resume and they were like, okay, here's a guy who's becoming enemies with everyone, so here we go. I found it very fascinating, and like many people, I did not know so much about Roy Cohn and his relationship and his importance for Trump, and for sort of creating that character and teaching him the ropes of power. And I also felt that I wanted to see more of his ambivalence and humanity and less of this sort of ABC psychology of, oh, he had a tough dad and that's why he became a bad person and such. I felt that the basic material is there, but it needs more complexity and needs more ambivalence, and it needs more of a, so to speak, a European approach. Sebastian is a extremely accomplished, technically accomplished actor, on top of him being very committed, on top of him being a true friend. I think the most important quality about him is that he really loves what he's doing. And he really, which is, it sounds banal, but that love, shows itself in extreme attention to details, in being super prepared, in being taking the challenges, and also the fact that, there is a difference between my point of view and my stakes in this game coming into it as a non-American from the outside, and someone like Sebastian who has a certain image in America, who has a certain fan base, and the fact that this guy is willing to risk that for something that he really truly believes in. I think that speaks volume of the kind of artist and the kind of person he is. When people watch Roy Cohn's character, they're so convinced, and the part he did in The Succession, they're so convinced, and okay, Jeremy Strong must be a real asshole, because he's so convincing. But when you see him in real life, and then is a wonderful, sweet, caring, empathetic person, you understand how convincing he is, how good he is as an actor. And I think part of what was really great about working with them was the fact that they were well prepared and open to, experimenting, playing, trying things out at the same time. Same goes for Maria, who was extremely prepared, but she was willing to change everything drastically, from one take to the other. And I think that is a kind of actor that I love to work with, because I'm extremely dependent on my actors. I don't have a magic word I can tell them to make them better than they are, I sort of see myself more as a sort of a gym instructor or football manager than anything else. This is first and foremost a movie. It's not a political piece. It's not supposed to tell you stuff like secret stuff you didn't know about Donald Trump or how to vote or, you know, I think it's an experience, and I would love for people to have that experience. The morally ambivalent experience of being very close to a character who's so morally ambivalent. I think that experience is interesting because through that experience you understand these people as human beings, but also understand the system they're working and navigating in. My biggest takeaway in terms of how sort of this character of Donald Trump is created is how good he was and still is in sort of curating the influence and seeing what works, what is popular, what is interesting, what people like to see or hear, and to absorb that as a sponge. If you look at his political movement, I mean, Donald Trump, his father, his whole family were Democrats, like many other powerful people in New York. And the way he has been seamlessly basically moving from being a liberal Democrat in New York to being a MAGA conservative, sort of more rural, so to speak, in policy and politics, that's really a testament of how savvy he is in and how good he is in navigating. And actually, contrary to what people say, that he doesn't listen to people and he doesn't take influence, I think he listens a lot. And he is very curious and he's very sort of engaged with the debate, but not in the way that people think.
Yesterday, this day's madness did prepare, which is a Iranian poet from the 11th century that Roy Cohn's father loved, named Omar Khayyam. In his famous epic poem, The Rubaiyat, he said, "Yesterday, this day's madness did prepare." It's a movie that explores and shows us the formation of a worldview, and it's a Frankenstein story about one monster creating another. I'd met Ali Abbasi in Telluride when I was there with James Gray's film a few years ago, and I'd seen his movie Border, and I saw Holy Spider at Telluride, and I was really blown away by him. He's an audacious filmmaker and has a kind of David Lynch phantasmagoric sensibility. And Gabe Sherman I knew because I'd read his book on Roger Ailes when I was working on that television show, and the kind of Murdoch Fox element. And I just thought that the combination of these two voices was really would be explosive and powerful. Yeah, I was aware of him and a fan of his work, and I just thought the combination of Gabe's rigorous, methodically researched journalistic veracity and Ali's Lynchian punk rock, monster movie sensibility would yield something original, which I think it did. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about him. I think what he does in this film is really astonishing. And even up close with him, in the trenches, I never really saw the stitching. What he had to do it's a big limb to go out on, and to really own it and internalize it and be in command of it. We both had to go out on that limb together. You know, I'm always looking for the possibility of transformation and risk, and this kind of provided both of those in a to the nth degree. You become a detective and try to learn and absorb everything that you possibly can and internalize everything that you can. There's a lot of source material about Roy Cohn. There's a lot of books. There's a few biographies. There's Cohn himself wrote a few books. There's a lot of footage and archival stuff and videos. So you do all of that. And I had to do some work physically to sort of render his essence, and you do all of that. But the real part of it is kind of a mystery to me. And you hope that if you do all the work, the research and the digging and strip mining it for everything it's worth, that you are understanding on a visceral level, something will come out of your unconscious that hopefully approximates the essence of this person. Your work has to be done by the time you get to set. The script needs to be known and forgotten about, and all the work, all the scaffolding has to have come off so that you just are them. Well, I thought she was just brilliant. We had very little to do together, and she and Roy had a complicated relationship. I think, in a way, Roy saw her as a threat to the primacy of his relationship with Donald. And he felt a sense of propriety over Donald and wanted to protect him from what he saw was, an interloper. He had a room full of stuffed frogs. He is a conundrum. He sent Julius and Ethel Rosenberg to the electric chair, and he was McCarthy's chief counsel during the hearings, and he was a fearsome lawyer whose only moral measure was winning. And he passed on a legacy of mendacity and lies and malign influence onto his star pupil. And we're all experiencing the ramifications of that in a very real and terrifying way. It very much exists and is incarnate now. The idea that you should deny everything, admit nothing, never accept defeat, attack. All of the things that the movie explores. And he was someone who stood for that denial of reality. He denied reality. He denied objective reality. He denied his own reality. And he did it defiantly. And so his yacht was called Defiance. He was a defiant man. And his defiance and his denialism, to me, are his sort of long shadow that we're all experiencing today. They're both kids from the boroughs with very difficult, damaged relationships with their parents, who wanted to, by any means, elevate themselves above others and seek power and a feeling of being special, I think. And he saw something kindred in Donald Trump, and a willingness and an eagerness to learn, sort of at the foot of the master. We're obviously in an unprecedented moment in this country's history. And this is a movie that looks at the seed and the nucleus of what got us here. This relationship and the time that this movie covers forecasts the political moment that we're in right now. Even though we all know we're playing with fire with this movie, and the stakes are so high, his intention, as he said, is to hold a mirror up to it. You know, it's what Shakespeare wrote, we hold a mirror up to nature and show the age and body of the time, its form and pressure. So this movie explores the forces and the pressures that formed the Donald Trump that we know today. And I think it's very important for all of us in this country and in this world to understand those forces and pressures.